Well, SABC News reporter Pimani Baloyi joins us live now with the latest update on this developing story. Pimani, a very good afternoon to you. So, of course, damning developments in this case. Let's backtrack a little bit just for the benefit of our viewers, right? Please take us through the historical background of how the story actually unfolded right from the start.
Good afternoon, Alicia. The very latest development, before I go to the historical background, is that the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, has just released a statement stating that they condemn the leaking of said affidavit that we are currently talking about. According to the NPA, this was not an affidavit that was open for public consumption, and they're saying they will be investigating to find out how it made it to public consumption, Alicia. But as you were asking about the history of how this story unfolded. The story started developing, Alicia, back in 2016 when the initial allegation was that money was looted and that the VBS Mutual Bank had been bankrupted due to this looting. This is money that mostly came from individual depositors and group depositors who saved their money in that mutual bank. But also, the second allegation was that municipalities who by law, by the prescribes of the Municipal Financial Management Act, are not allowed to, were investing funds into VBS. And that's when an investigation was instituted. It was led by Advocate Tshifhiwa Matodzi, and we saw later, years later, he released a statement implicating several people into that looting, Alicia.
Very interesting indeed, Pimani. So, latest developments in that the NPA wasn't even privy to the leakage of this affidavit. So, who are some of the most prominent people, as well as names, that have been fingered in this report? And how have they responded to the actual allegations? We've always, of course, according to the reports, known that Julius Malema as well as Floyd Shivambu were at the forefront of the scandal. But of course, there's quite a whole lot more others that have been implicated, Pimani.
Yes, Alicia, this is a 263 affidavit. So you can imagine the amount of information that we ourselves are also still trying to process. But some of the prominent names that we've seen, Alicia, as you rightfully mentioned, is the leader of the EFF, his deputy, as well as his secretary general. So according to that affidavit, the beauty of this affidavit is that it starts off with how he personally, Mr. Matodzi, the former chairperson of VBS Bank, came to know about VBS, saying as somebody who grew up around Toyando, he knew the bank and he had personal links to it. But when he moved to Gauteng to study to become a chartered accountant, when he would come back home, he was amazed to see the queues outside that bank dwindling, which led him to conclude that it means something was going wrong with the bank, and he grew a personal interest to grow that bank. That's when he went to buy his first shares, but then he also went to buy a bigger stake. But speaking about the names of people who were personally linked, he speaks about how he himself, after allegations that former President Zuma had been given a loan by that bank to fund his Kandla homestead, when he started seeing statements from the EFF condemning that loan, he personally reached out to the EFF and set up meetings. He said in that meeting there was the president, the deputy president, and Mr. Marshall Dlamini, where he says they discussed that he appealed to them that as a black party, they should not be at the forefront of collapsing the image of the bank because it is catering for the black community. He says out of that meeting there were agreements where VBS would, what he calls, donate funds to the EFF. He says the donations were paid into an account that was created by Mr. Floyd Shivambu's bank, its brother's company, and an initial amount of 5 million rand was deposited into that VBS account. Later, there were monthly installments of 1 million rand, but also later there was a renovations of a restaurant that allegedly was owned by the EFF. As you were asking, Alicia, the response from the EFF, we've reached out to them and we have gotten a response, a statement from Ms. Leanne Matthews, who says according to them, the members of the media constantly want to drag the EFF name into this VBS corruption scandal, and she says they do not have time to be dealing with that. Currently, they are busy with their parliamentary work, but further, they are busy with preparing for their anniversary celebrations that will happen in Kimberley. So the EFF saying they are not going to attend to any of those specific allegations about how much they probably got in donations and how much they didn't. But the second stakeholder that is mentioned, Alicia, as you played that clip by the spokesperson of the ANC here in the province, are some prominent ANC leaders in the province, including the deputy chairperson of the party, Ms. Florence Radzilani, who, according to Mr. Matodzi's affidavit, she received a Christmas gift and she also asked for more. According to the ANC, they are going today, they are having their usual PEC meeting. So part of that meeting will also discuss this affidavit that has been linked, and they will come up with a way forward. But he emphasized that they will ensure that no one is protected. Whoever needs to be held criminally liable should be done so. But other prominent names is Vavenda King, Mr. Tony, former Vavenda King, Mr. Tony Limpopo Jimmy, whom we know was removed from that position currently. At the time, according to Mr. Matodzi, they would pay Mr. Ramabulana, the former king, an amount of around 300,000 rand every month. They also purchased him several vehicles that were very costly, some amounting to 5 million rand. But Alicia, these are lengthy reports. There will be other names that as the week progresses, we will be bringing to the spotlight, and we will be getting to their response to these allegations. But Alicia, the emphasis is that this is a leaked affidavit, and we don't know in terms of how tested the allegations in it are at this point in time. So we will be keeping an eye on it, Alicia.
Very interesting indeed that you mentioned that, Pimani, because also looking at now that you've confirmed that the NPA has said this is actually a leaked document. Very interesting that you mentioned around how the money was actually moved around to actually implicate the brother of, EFF Deputy President there, Floyd Shivambu, who actually owns the company Scamega, and that is where actually some of the monies, we understand, according to the leaked affidavit, were actually filtered through. So maybe take us through where the matter stands now in terms of criminal charges. Who has been officially charged, and is there any likelihood for more others to be charged very soon?
Scamega, that company, the most interesting thing around that EFF link is Mr. Matodzi himself speaking about meetings specifically with Mr. Julius Malema and Mr. Floyd Shivambu, stating that personally he only met Mr. Shivambu's brother, Mr. Brian Shivambu, much later on when the company had been formed, because he says he insisted that the funds, the donation, would be made to a VBS Bank account. So he says they later went to form that account under Mr. Shivambu, the brother of Mr. Shivambu's name, and then they opened that VBS account. So it's quite interesting how he personally says they were aware. Even there's a line in the report, he says they are aware that this was a corrupt transaction. So indeed, we will be keeping an eye on that to find out what specifically will unfold. But speaking of criminal cases, Ayanda, there's been 2 criminal cases that have been finalized. The first being of the former chief financial officer, Mr. Philip Truta, who pleaded guilty, same as Mr. Matodzi now pleaded guilty, but he pleaded guilty in 2020. He was convicted to 10 years imprisonment. He has been serving that jail term since 2020. Right now, Mr. Matodzi is the second person to plead plead guilty to this charge. He has been found guilty of, like, if you look at the years, they amount to over 400 years, but effectively he's been sentenced to 15 years imprisonment for all these charges. But alongside him, when he was going through the trial, there was 4 other executives that we know their pre-trial hearing has been set for Monday, the 22nd of July. So we'll be monitoring to see how this affects their pre-trial hearing.